Greetings. Welcome to the Dragon Con Urban Fantasy Track author interview series. I'm joined today by the fabulous Ben Aaronovitch, and I am just very excited to get to talk to him about this wonderful series that I know a lot of you enjoy and that is definitely one of my favorites. And I really appreciate you being here, Ben. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, now the first question I always ask everyone, just because I guess it seems a little obvious, but it's also because I'm curious, is did you read fantasy and science fiction as a child or young adult, or was that something you developed a taste for later in life?
I think the answer to that question is: did I read anything else as a young
Oh,
adult? I wasn't a very particularly good reader. I mean, this is an absolutely true story. I wasn't a particularly good reader. My teachers were not pointing me out as a future author or anything. And about 9, we went on a trip to the school library, which is like a library annex that was open for schools that the schools used. And I went to the schools and I put my hand on a book, and I'll never forget because it was called The Last Planet in some zones, but Star Rangers by Andrew Norton. And I pulled it out and I took it home, and that was it. That was basically, from then on, it was just science fiction for about 3 years. And in those days there wasn't a lot of what they call juvenile science fiction, so you quickly kind of went through the library store of age appropriate science fiction and just
right.
started reading anything that were, we went into the adult section and started reading anything. And this being the 70s, of course, the librarians let you, because this was the 70s, and we were all letting it hang out, and including science fiction. So from about the ages of, they say the golden age of science fiction is 12, and I'm living proof of that. So from about 9 to 14, I was reading like 2 to 3 books a day, indiscriminately. And of course, I ran out of science fiction because there wasn't as much around in those days. So I started reading crime as well. So that was basically crime and science fiction. That was me. And weirdly, women's fiction, because my mum had a lot of it. So I tended to pick up, when I ran out of books, I tended to read what my mum had lying around. So I was reading people like Val McDermid and when they were in the women's press and things like that. So I had a very strange, eclectic kind of book reading habit, but it was mostly science fiction. If there was any science fiction, I ignored everything else.
Oh, okay. And everything kind of was a trickle down if you had to move on to something.
If I had to read something other than science fiction, I would read I would, if I had to.
Were you one of those kids who used to read during class, that when you were reading your own book?
No, you weren't allowed to. God, no, you can't allowed to read in class. I used to read walking along, though, to school and stuff, and things like that. I was one of those kids that would run out of the classroom, find myself a corner, sit in it, open the book, or sit in the library, read in the school library. I was one of those. But I mean, I actually, quite a lot of my classmates were like that, so it wasn't like this was a weird thing to do. And I did, my share of running around the playground pretending to be an aeroplane and all that kind of stuff, as you do.
Right. Now you got your writing career started by working on some television shows, some of which people may have heard of course, with Doctor Who. And well, I mean, on this side of the pond, it's not quite maybe as common.
I wrote with Doctor Who before it was fashionable anywhere, including in the UK. It'd gone out of fashion when I was writing for it. So it's come back in fashion now.
Right. Oh, yes. It's a very big deal. And then a show called Casualty and one called Jupiter Moon. How did you get involved in that?
Well, this was the old days when when you could get in through by attracting the attention of the appropriate script editor. So you watched television, you made a note of the script editor, because script editors had a lot of power in those days. And basically, because script editors were generally showrunners. They had a lot of the functions of showrunners, although none of the prestige. And you would check their name. You'd find one that was making stuff that you look kind of in your wheelhouse, and then you would write a script and you would send it to them. And they would, often looking out for new writers, and so therefore and they weren't deluged because it was an effort. You had to write it, print it, send it. It was like, there was no kind of instant, emailing stuff to people. So I did that. Someone picked it up. They liked the script. They said, what do you like? I said, I like science fiction and crime. They said, well, write a spec script for Doctor Who and a spec script for this thing called Rockcliffe's Babies, which was a crime show, which I did. And I sent them in. And had Rockcliffe's Babies not been cancelled, I would have written for that as well. But Doctor Who, Andrew Cartmel, called me in and said, I want to talk about your stuff. He really liked my stuff. We chatted we pitched ideas at each other for a while. And then they asked me if I wanted to write the Dalek story. And that was basically it as far as it went. Next thing I know, I was a professional writer. Yay.
Yay, yeah.
Yay for not doing any work. That's what I say.
And then the opportunities for the other two shows came along after that.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Cartmel went on to Casualty, and he took me with him.
Oh, gotcha.
And Jupiter Moon, my agent got me. I mean, and there were lots of other stuff. When you do television, see like credits for television. For every credit you see someone has on television, there's usually like 3 or 4 that never got made. So people go, you sometimes get paid for them, but you don't really get a credit unless it gets made, and so therefore. You write for stuff, you come up with treatments, you have meetings, you get paid occasionally, but nothing ever happens beyond that. So a lot of a script writer's life is invisible and thankless. Thankless and invisible. That's basically the script writer's life.
Thankless and invisible. Okay. Yeah. That's very interesting and very sad at the same time.
Well, it is, but it is what it is. I mean, it's a collaborative effort. I mean, there are 90 people. Well, these days, especially, you go on a television shoot. There's 90 people, of which 13 are as important as the writer. Even with a writer's ego pumping that up, and everyone has their input. You don't write for like a really good actor and then expect them just to not contribute something of themselves to the project. You don't write a scene without the director thinking, I'll shoot it this way, or the DP looking at the lighting, or the set designers, or the costume designer. All these very, very creative people who all get paid more than you, by the way. And what happens is once you're in production, you're basically not needed anymore. If the catering van doesn't turn up, people notice, but if the writer doesn't turn up, they don't even know you're not there. I basically only turned up for the catering van. I mean, like free food for a whole week. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I bet that is a nice perk, I'm sure, especially if it's good food, right?
But in America, where you have unionized sets, you have like the craft table, which means you can basically stuff your face the entire day. I would be very surprised if aspiring writers don't go in with a doggy bag and just clear off bits of the craft table.
Something for the next day or for dinner or something.
Yeah. Take it home. You mean like you take it. If you had kids, you'd be taking like most of that stuff home for your kids. It's all very bad when you stuff those craft tables. It's delicious.
More than one bag, probably.
Yes. Oh, you'd be careful. You'd like have tote bags, and you just come in, fill up one in the morning, fill up another one, meet your partner or something at lunchtime, pass it over, and come back.
That's right. It's come back and pick me up later. Yeah, I'll see you in a few
hours.
As
the writer, you'd be invisible, so no one would notice you doing it.
Oh, there you go. And that helps to make up for the thankless part.
Well, it's thankless because it's what I mean. I love to say I came up with this, but I think it's William Goldman said writing is he used the 70s feminist term of shit work, which is basically housework is shit work, because no one ever says to you, oh, this house is lovely and clean. They only ever notice it when you don't do it properly. And writing is like that. No one ever watches a film and goes, wow, the writing on this is really crisp. No, if you do a really bad dialogue pass or something, everyone goes, oh, the writing was terrible. But they don't notice you if you're, the actor gets all the credit or the director gets all the credit. And that's just the way it is. I mean, there's no getting around it. We've got enormous egos. We can take it. So, and also times I've seen when writers have been given control of, like, given the keys to the to the cabinet, have not always been highly successful. But there's a process, and it's a process for a reason. So that
Right.
was my writing career. I couldn't go back to it now, I don't think, because I've got so used to being like absolute god of my universe that I don't think I could go back to kind of like having someone tell me what to do. Oh, it's got to be funny in the beginning. Go away, die. Ah,
Yeah,
your first reaction.
I can imagine.
Don't ever let anyone tell you. As soon as someone says something critical, you want to kill them. I want to kill you. And part of being a writer is learning not to kill people when they critique your work.
Oh, okay. Well,
See, that's why a lot of writers do workshopping, because it trains you not to strangle someone when they're critiquing your work.
that's probably very good advice. Do not strangle people.
Yeah, do not strangle people. No, I mean, anyone actually who's working with writers, I have a good tip for you, right? Always start with the praise. Okay? Don't start with the criticism. If you start with the criticism, they just won't be listening to anything else you say for the rest of the sentence, for the rest of the conversation. So you start with, yeah, I thought it was very good. And don't use the word but, because we hate the word but. You just go, oh, it's very good. I think we couldn't work.
Right. There you go.
We need to bring up something from the, don't go straight in with, oh, the end's shit. We need to rewrite it. That's it. They've stopped listening to you at that point. And they're imagining strangling you. So.
Yeah, which they have learned how to control the urge, but they still want to do it.
I mean, by definition, to have got that far in the career, you have learned not to strangle people when they criticize you, starting with your primary school teacher.
Right, yes, and that could be included on some kind of a list of the different stages of being a writer. Yes, okay.
Not strangling people.
Now you had mentioned. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I bring this up not because I want people to be scared of writers, because we're pathetic lot generally, but because I want you to understand what's going on in our head. You see, we're thinking, I will kill you with death if you criticize us, even if it's completely valid criticism. We emotionally, we have to learn. What you do as a writer is you get your notes and you read your notes going, I will kill everyone, and then you read them again later and go, right, okay, that's a valid point. Or yeah, I can work with that, or that's something. But the first reaction is always, I will kill you with death.
Yeah.
And then you get on it. Then you get on with it, and then professional. The definition of professionalism is in fact, learning not to kill people with death when they criticize you. Basically,
that's a good quote. All of our viewers should make note of that, especially those who are aspiring writers or critics.
You must
one or the other.
Urge to kill people when they criticize you. Once you've done that, you're probably you're good for a career in television.
Oh, okay. Well,
or film,
and probably some other things as well, but definitely.
Probably. Although I don't think you should be this passive and say, when you're working in a shop.
Right.
I think people who work in shops are I've worked in shops. I've worked retail, so I know what it's like. And so therefore, I think, if you have the impulse to strangle someone in retail, you should follow through. And as to teach shop floor managers and troublesome customers not to do things like that.
Well, that's actually a good segue into my next question, because I thought it was interesting that it was an interesting mix that when you kind of left your script writing career and started working at Waterstones, and you managed both the crime and science fiction sections. And I thought, well, that is, that's an interesting mix, which kind of leads into the Rivers of London series. But at the same time, I when you said that those were two of your most, of your best loved reading areas as you were growing up, that makes a lot more sense. And that you wrote scripts that had to do with both of those as well. But do you feel as though that led to, which I'm going to show my copy of which is actually this copy is from the UK, from a Rossiter's books. I'm not sure which location, that one of my sisters-in-law brought back for me a few years ago when they were in England. So
just to plug this, you can now get the Kindle version because we bought back the rights for the first 3 books. So the title has reverted from Midnight Riot, although there'll probably still be copies in the stores. It's reverted to Rivers of London on the Kindle version now. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. It wasn't my idea to change it to Midnight Riot. I just thought to say that.
Yeah, a lot of things that I've seen written about that were like, people have commented inexplicably it was called Midnight Riot. And yes.
It was a holdover, you see, because when I started, you got to remember, God, I started the book. The first book was essentially sold in 2009, 2010. I wrote it in 2009, sold in 2010, published in 2012. And one of the things about it was pre-internet, you could change the titles in various countries because there wasn't really a crossover that much, sort of, unless you had a book that got really, really big. There wasn't a lot of word of mouth, so there was no downside to changing the title to what they call localizing the title. But by the time I came along, you see, word of mouth had shifted from like literal word of mouth to word of computer keyboard, right? Especially in science fiction and fantasy, and so therefore, changing the title actually was a detrimental action if they wanted to sell more books, you see. But I don't think they'd twigged that. So that was the thing. But I think you'll find there's a lot less of that now. Changing titles, and Philosopher's Stone and all that. There's a lot less. Although British publishers are just as bad going the other way. You sit there going, "Why have you changed the title of this? I bought this twice. It's not fair."
Right, people get confused. Well, I know I did have an ebook copy of it prior to being given this one as a gift, and at first I thought, wait a minute, and then it didn't take me too long to discover that it's actually the same book, just the different title depending on where you got it from. But yes, I'm sure it has confused people over time.
Well, the first 2 books were localized, so they changed things like pavement to sidewalk and things like that, and then they kind of lost interest, which is just as well. And now I'm too big. See, so I've gone through that stage now where I can say, my contract actually says that they can't localize it. They can change the spellings, but they can't change words, so to speak. In my contract. It shouldn't actually have to be in my contract. I grew up reading things like Ed McBain, and I had to work out what a pair of Oxfords were, and an Oldsmobile, and all this other stuff. Right? People are clever. I think the American publishers underestimate the intelligence of their own audience a bit. I think Americans are perfectly capable of working things out from context, and now we all have Google, so it's not like I don't know what that means. I shall stop reading this book immediately. Oh dear.
Right. What does this one word that I'm not really sure?
Kindle, and you can just poke it with your finger now, and it just tells you what the bloody word is. So,
yes.
People, and I don't think publishers really caught up with that. And the thing is that because it's a science fiction or fantasy book, it's early adopter. So it's like all these people who are good. If you read science fiction, you're good at working things out from context. Because you're full of stories where people will walk in. He grabbed his flugger by the handle and chugged it down. And no one goes, "Oh, I don't know what a flugger is. I'm going to throw this book against the wall."
Right. Rather than figure out what it means. Yeah, you're right. That's certainly the case.
People who read that will generally go for reading comprehension. And I'd like to also point out, I don't know about in America, but reading you have to work out words from context is something you're supposed to do by key stage 2, I think, which is about 9. You're supposed to do it by the time you're 9.
Right.
So I just throw that in there.
True. That's a very good point. So people shouldn't complain too much, right? Now, if you had the chance, say there's someone watching this interview that has no idea of what what this series is about, what's your elevator pitch description of what the Rivers of London series is about?
Never had an elevator pitch description that really satisfied me. The closest thing I ever got to an elevator pitch is so antiquely British that it's no good. It's no good for America. My elevator pitch is, what if Gandalf joined the Sweeneys? And for that, you have to know who the Sweeney is.
Okay.
Sweeney was a famous British TV series of the 1970s, cop show of the 1970s. And it was the first of the shows that really focused in on the kind of like working class blokey nature of the Metropolitan Police, and it had a lot of action. It was very innovative. It was filmed on film and rather than tape. And it had John Thor, who went on to play, ironically, Inspector Morse. But it's kind of like the iconic cop show for my generation. And obviously Gandalf is Gandalf. I don't need to explain who Gandalf is. So I've been trying to find something that kind of matches that up, and it's and people have said, what if Harry Potter grew up and joined the filth? But it's not really like that, because the world is different.
Right.
It really doesn't convey the kind of the Sweeney-ness of the world. So I find it very difficult. If you like crime and you like fantasy, buy it. It's a really good book, and it's cheap now. It's on Kindle. You can get it nice and low price. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the rest.
I think they will like it. Now, for the series, did the idea of mixing the magic and the police work kind of come to you as one? I mean, did it kind of fully form that way, or did you add one after the other? How did that come about?
I like crime and I like science fiction and fantasy, and I'm too lazy to write 2 books. Okay. So I decided to, so am I going to write a crime fantasy or am I going to write a crime science fiction? I decided science fiction would involve way too much research and also go out of date much faster, right? Because if you do like a near future crime thing, all your predictions for computer technology go wrong within about the first year. In fact, they're usually out of date by the time the book comes out. And then people who know these things point at you and laugh. They go, he thought that about computers could do that. That's so funny. Right, and I didn't want that. I don't like being pointed at and laughed at. So I thought I'd make it a fantasy. Then it was just a question of well, what is it? And for a long time, it was an idea I had for a television series quite a long time ago. So like in the 1990s. That I didn't bother pitching beyond. I didn't bother developing beyond a vague idea, because I knew it wouldn't. Nobody would buy it, because they didn't like. There was a big anti kind of science fiction and fantasy environment, and especially if you're a new writer, I didn't think no one was going to buy it. I just knew. So, but basically, it was called Magic Cops, which gives you an indication as a working title. And I just like the idea of working class police officers that did magic. So it was like people that were down on the street and they would like do magic. And I had this vision in my head of this sort of fairly gruff detective inspector and his sergeant going in, and they're explaining to like the another police officer on the scene that there's no such thing as magic, and everything the witnesses have said is just completely wrong. And like the guy goes, "Oh, good," and then he walks off, and he goes, "Is he gone?" And go, "Yeah." And then they do magic to kind of illuminate the scene or something like that. And I thought, I want that. I want something like that. When I developed as a book story, I sort of took elements of that and I took elements of other things, and I decided that I wanted to make it the policing as realistic as possible, because it's more fun if you ground the policing to then run the magic into it. You see, and I can get away with that. Usually you don't get quite realistic policing in books and films, because it's boring as all buggery. And so you usually have to spice it up by having, car chases and stuff like that. But I'm spicing it up with magic, so I can make the policing quite realistic, because it's more fun when the magic hits it. And that's basically where the idea came from. I was going to make magic as fit into the real world as snugly as possible, so that people would be walking going, "Is it real? Is it? And that involved, then I had to think, well, how does magic actually work? How does it fit in with the laws of thermodynamics, all that kind of stuff? And I just had a good time. And then I sat down and wrote what's basically the first 4 pages. And I had Peter's character all of a sudden, and I read it and I thought, fuck me, this is going to sell.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to sell to, not necessarily to people, but it was definitely going to sell to like a publisher. And at that time, I was going bankrupt, so that's what I really needed. I needed that advance. Give me some money. So I knew it was going to sell. And then it was just a question of writing coming up with a plot, because I didn't have a plot. 90,000 words of prose, and I sat down, and he just got better and better. The character just got better and better. And then Nightingale turned up, and he got better and better. And Leslie turned up, and she got better and better. And then like Beverly came on the scene, and all the other characters, Sewell bloody turned up like a surprise, and swearing his ass off, and they just turned up. It was just like what I hadn't done that since my very first Doctor Who. I hadn't written anything where it just seemed to, as if it was already there, and it was just sort of appearing as I needed it. I mean, that's an exaggeration. There was quite a lot of head on table moments during the process of writing it, but it was it was fun. I think, and that's the thing. I find writing tremendously fun. I don't find it work. It's work in the way that running a marathon is work. Not that I've ever run a marathon. The way it looks like when other people do it, it's hard, but you're not doing it kind of like for money. Although
right.
Nice, I would probably be writing on AO3 if I wasn't getting paid for it. I'd be writing stuff in magazines. I'd be writing novels that went into drawers, and I'd be writing fan fiction on AO3 because I like to write, so that I would be writing. But I get paid for it, so I don't have to write.
Which is a nice bonus since that's what you spend an awful lot of your time doing, right?
I don't have to, I hate work. You see, I hate actual work. I hate being told what to do. I hate getting up in the morning. I don't mind getting up in the morning as long as I don't have to then go somewhere and do something. So that's the thing. So it's allowed me that lifestyle that I wish to become accustomed to, which is the one where I sit mostly in front of my computer and write things, and occasionally play Civilization 6.
Okay, yeah, that's what you do for a break, right? Now you mentioned, being able to incorporate so much of the police work itself into the story, and that's one of the things that, to me, is always so important within urban fantasy, is to actually emphasize the real world setting, to make it somehow believable, which I think you do really well. And within this series, you have the backdrop of the police work and of London, and or other environs, somewhere in the UK. And do you, in order to get all the law enforcement stuff quite as accurate as you do, or as real feeling, let's put it that way, do you work with any outside consultants that you get feedback from?
It was harder at the beginning. I had to basically use open sources and occasionally phone up the Metropolitan Police press department and say things like, where's the local murder squad, and things like that. And then what happened was as the books became more successful, some police officers started reading them, and and some lists, and some geologists, and some riverine experts, and quite a lot of people who are very useful. And because we now live in a connected age, they would turn up on Twitter and go, "Oh, you got that wrong," and I go, "Aha! You are now my expert on this subject." Ha ha ha.
So you basically waited for them to come to you.
Oh yeah. I think we established that I'm quite lazy. So also, I don't like to impose on people. I'm not like, there's a writer called Linda LaPlante who would talk her way into morgues and things. I can't do that. It's just like, I just feel like, oh no, they're doing a job. You don't want to kind of get on their nerves. Right. So but now I don't need to do that. Now mostly the information comes to me. I've got a network of people who make suggestions as well, and all come up to me, or I send my work to them and say, what have I got wrong here? And I'm always learning new things. Like, I think I've got it down pat, and then they go, no, you don't say that. And also, the Metropolitan Police reorganizes about once every 6 months. So you write it one week and they change the organizational structure and all the acronyms the next week. So you learn all that kind of stuff, and there's also loads of stuff. I mean, I've learned so much stuff about like architecture and drugs and all this weird stuff that you start picking up. Agriculture, like quite for a Foxglove summer, I learned quite a lot of agriculture and names of trees and things that I didn't know before. That's the sort of thing.
Yeah, that is an interesting characteristic of Peter's, that he is so much into the architecture, and it's that definitely
that came up because I was writing an urban environment. If you imagine yourself, you're writing the countryside, and you don't know the names of anything, so you're going, there was a wide thing of green stuff, and at the bottom there was more brown stuff with some tall brown stuff with some green stuff on top. You see, if that's what you're describing, if you go into an urban environment, you don't know what the types of houses are. That's what you're describing. But if you can go in and go ahead of Edwardian gables, then it doesn't really matter that the audience doesn't have the faintest idea what an Edwardian gable is, because just the words Edwardian gable kind of conjure up an image of something, regardless of whether it's the right image.
True. That is very true. You hear Edwardian, especially as one of the,
or you say like had Gothic turret. Everyone has a vague idea what a Gothic turret is. But Peter actually knows what a Gothic turret is in architecture terms. So it allows me to describe the city in more detail. If you read the Abigail books or the Toby Winter books or the upcoming Reynolds book, they're not nearly so interested in architecture. So they're much more boring about how they describe buildings because they're just not interested in them.
Okay.
Although Toby will bore for Germany on food. So...
Now, can you describe just a little bit about the magic system that you use within the series, just to?
Well, I wanted basically two types of magic. I wanted the kind of like an Age of Enlightenment magic, because it was developed by Isaac Newton, and I got that basically from a Science of Discworld book, where they're talking about Isaac Newton and his contribution to science, and they're saying he wrote more about alchemy than he did. He spent more time writing about the dimensions of the Temple of Solomon than he did about describing gravity. And this is, and they said, well, he was interested in alchemy, and that was like very natural philosophy was like that at the time. And I think it was Jack Cohen, who's the co-writer for the Science of Discworld, said, but if anyone was going to find a magic system, it was going to be Isaac Newton. A little bell went off in my head, and I went, aha! Isaac Newton invented magic, right? Or rather synthesized magic into a reliable, repeatable system, which is basically, there was lots of magic around, but he synthesized it into a reliable, repeatable system. And so therefore, well, everything's in Latin. So everything's in Latin now. And you have to work, but what are you doing when you make, say, a spell? Is it the words? No, it's not the words. It's the shape you make in your mind. And the words are just notes, like it's like a musical notation that you use to associate with each shape. And then you string these together so that you can put, and you agree on the names so that you can write the spells down so other people can read that and go, aha, I see what that is. And I can learn the spell myself. And then you have to just weigh, why isn't everyone doing it? So what's the limitation on magic? So you have to explain what the problem, why people aren't just learning magic left, right, and center. Why aren't people taking constant video pictures of people doing magic? Why isn't it on CCTV? So you have to come up for workarounds for reasons why it stayed on the download. So that, you basically, your magic system just develops out of those restrictions, and you start saying, well, it works like this, it works like that. That's the problem with that. It eats microprocessors.
Yeah.
So nobody can, people take film of it, but their phones die. And so there's, that's it for a film. And that's why you don't get CCTV footage. It's quite rare if you don't have someone teach you properly. Peter describes it's like learning to play the violin, if learning to play the violin killed you if you did it wrong.
Yeah, that would kind of throw off people, wouldn't it? Yeah.
So that's why it's quite limiting, and you need, so if you have someone who can teach you, it's quite safe to learn. You could, as long as someone is teaching you how to do it and keeping an eye on you and making sure you don't do it wrong. But if you don't, and so that's why people who experiment on their own end up, in dead, basically, or crippled in some various horrible ways.
Are their brains like cauliflowers? Yeah.
Yes, they're cauliflower brain. And I was about 3 books in, and someone said, "This is not how brain injuries work." So they became my brain injury person. And ha ha ha.
Yeah. Well, that's all you need to do is just throw an idea out there that you're not quite sure about, and then somebody's going to come in and
try and get it as close. But you just constantly surprised because you have as a writer, your view of the world is very shallow. You have a lot of knowledge, but it's very shallow, right? And there's all these people out there with deep, deep knowledge. Even at a basic level, even if you've just done a degree in something, you probably have more knowledge about it than I do. And they're very useful. I mean, thank God they don't write books, is all I'm saying.
Or at least not fiction, right?
Yes, not fiction. No problem with non-fiction. You can write as much non-fiction as you like.
Exactly.
Just demarcation, that's what I want.
And what about the concept of the rivers and their place in the series? How can you describe that briefly for our viewers?
Okay, well, that came about when you're cobbling together an idea. You're often drawing on lots of things that have been percolating around in your head. And there was one idea I had, and as a writer, this is probably true of everyone, but particularly true of writers, is you tend to watch things going, oh, what if that was slightly different? So one of the things that I had in my mind is, what if Hogwarts was a comprehensive school? It's a state school, sorry.
Right, yeah.
State school. And I thought, well, you wouldn't get an owl. You'd get a social worker. So, and I thought, well, who's the social worker? And I thought, a large, formidable Nigerian woman, Anglo-Nigerian woman, came to mind because a lot of people who work in that area are of that background. And I thought, well, that's not very interesting. Just, I thought, but what if she's like the goddess of the River Thames, right? What if she was actually the goddess of a small river in Ogun State in Nigeria, and then she emigrated over and found the Thames open and went, whoa, well, I'm going to have the Thames, right? Because she comes over in the 50s when the Thames is biologically dead, and Father Thames, who is a well-established kind of British folkloric figure, has just given up in disgust and gone up the river, leaving the tidal part of the Thames to sort of like rot because he's upset. And she comes up, and she's actually the reason why the river is recovered in the last 30 years, is part of her influence. It's now one of the cleanest industrial rivers in Europe, you see, because they have all sorts of things like seals and porpoises woofing up the channel. I always like to imagine like the sisters are all telling them to go away. Get back!
Scaring everybody off.
Well, yeah, because what happens is the whales come up and they get stranded. Whales shouldn't really come up an estuary, and I think that, I imagine they spend quite a lot of time telling the whales to piss off. Get back! You won't like it. You get stranded, and it's embarrassing, and then you die, and then it smells.
That's right. Yeah, that's.
And you stink up. And all you're doing is providing a feast for the eels, and we don't need that. Thanks. It's the old bloody North Sea out there. Just get out of there.
Right, you got lots more space somewhere else. Don't come into this.
So I put that in a comic because I couldn't resist that one. I was like,
oh,
so Beverly's out there warning some whales off, going shoo shoo. But yeah, so basically, well, when it became a book, I thought I found all these other rivers, because people don't realize how many rivers there are actually in London, both hidden underground and also on the surface. So rivers like Beverly Brook and the Wandle, they're mostly on the surface. They're not underground. Some of them are basically sewers. Some of them were turned into the sewer system, but a lot of them are still on the Lee and all those. So I thought, well, what if those are all the daughters of Mama Thames? And then the next thing I know, they were taking a problem. I have a problem with characters, right? So I invent them and then they try and take over the narrative. And that's basically what happened. The rivers just went, no, this book's about us now. And I was like, oh, no.
And you're they're like, how about so you have to work it out with them. It's like, okay, you get some of it, but then some of it goes to you.
and you know, little Brent goes, "Believe it, fam," and that's it. You're stuck with the rivers.
Now, one aspect of the series that I am most impressed with as well is that the way that you just kind of seamlessly infuse humor into the narrative.
Yeah, I like to take credit for that, but the truth is, I can't write seriously. So it's not so much that I seamlessly fuse music into the narrative. It's that I can't scrub the bloody humor out, so I just live with it. I tried writing serious, and it only lasts about 2 pages. So you'll notice that I'll have a serious bit in the book, and it'll be serious, 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 and then someone will make a joke because it's just my nature. It's just my style. You can only fight your own writing style a certain distance, and then it reasserts itself. And my writing style is it's got to be, and also it's written in Peter's voice, and Peter is chirky, cheeky Cockney, makes a lot. He's that kind of got that London. He's a London sparrow, isn't he? He's got that. He's a starling. He's got that kind of Cockney wit in adversity kind of thing. So however bad it gets, he's going to make a joke. It's just that's the way it's going to be. It drives French people mad, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, it drives French. But I've heard a French businessman on Radio 4 once was complaining that the problem is you do business with the English, and he says they come into the room, they come into the conference room, the humour comes with them. You're sitting there making a serious discussion of profit margins going forward, and they're making jokes about it, and the French find that hard. They find that they think humour is something that you have in a more appropriate venue. They don't like humour leaking into serious subjects, but the English are incapable of doing anything without making a joke there.
Can't separate the two or something. Yeah.
I challenge you to find an English funeral where someone doesn't stand up and make a joke, right? In the funeral oration, at least once, and I refer you to the Monty Python funeral when Graham Chapman died. I refer you to that. If it's on YouTube, if you want to see what an English what the exemplar English funeral looks like. Watch Graham Chapman's funeral ceremony with John Cleese and all that lot. And every English person aspires to have a funeral like that. They want people to be like that at their funeral. I mean, they want weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and people throwing themselves on the coffee, but we want the humour as well. We want everything. We're really greedy.
Well, there you go. But that'll give everybody a little bit of homework to check out that video if they haven't seen it before. Now,
swearing, trigger warnings, swearing, because of death.
Lots of it. Swearing and death, those two things look out for, and the humor.
Yeah.
And the humor has to do with probably the death and the swearing, right? So
yeah, the swearing, death, well, they're all in there. It's a big mixture of death, swearing, and humor.
Now, within the series, who are some of your favorite secondary or recurring characters to write?
I love all my characters. Some are more irritating than others, but that's just because I love them more and they keep coming back. So I love Abigail. I love Zach, although nobody else likes Zach except for me. I love all the foxes, especially Indigo. I like Varvara particularly. I think Varvara is one of my favorite. Gilead, obviously, because she just she's like the gift that keeps on giving.
Right, right.
Nightingale. I don't really think Nightingale is a secondary character. I think of if you think of them in tiers, I think it's Peter is tier 1, and then Nightingale and Beverly are tier 2, and Abigail's probably tier 2 now. See, I have a lot of this problem with these characters. I write them for like one scene and they won't leave.
Right.
So I'm stuck with them. Like Abigail was one of those. It's just a character I wrote. She's just supposed to be an annoying local teenager. Like 5 lines. I didn't bother even coming up with any characteristics except annoying local teenager. And the next thing I know, she kind of crept into the next book, and then she crept even more into the book after that, and then I'm stuck with her.
Right.
And then she's got her own book, and you're thinking, when did that happen? So. And the
But
same with the
she's great. She's a great kind of foil for Peter too. So
yeah, and it's also nice to be able to write from somebody else's point of view that's also a Londoner, but not a different kind of Londoner, a younger Londoner with a different point of view. And
right.
I love them all. I love them all. It's usually who I've just written. It's like who's my favorite. It's the person I've just written is my favorite character. Oh, I think great. This is a great secondary character. I've got them all up in Scotland at the moment, so I'm having fun with the Scots.
Oh, okay.
I'm writing a book set in Aberdeen, and there's some great Scottish characters. There's a very long-suffering DS called Blinshell and his boss, and I'm just having a lot of fun.
Well, I look forward to that one. Now,
yeah, I might got to finish it first.
yeah, yeah. We'll let you finish it. We'll let you finish it before we get too demanding. Now, aside from either version of the Faceless Man, who, from your perspective, was probably the most dangerous antagonist or foe that Peter has faced within the series so far?
Well, Vivara was pretty scary.
Mhm.
Almost fought Nightingale to a standstill. Mrs. Oh God, I've forgotten their names. The Americans, the library people.
Oh yes. I can't remember her name either. It wasn't that all that long ago. I read that book.
Terrible. I can't remember her name. Well, in my defense, it was 4 books ago. So
Right.
she's fair. The Angel of Death is fairly formidable from the last one. I don't really think of them in those terms. I'm not writing Naruto, so it's like I don't think in terms of power levels. I really don't. I mean, Nightingale is the most dangerous combat wizard in the world, probably.
Right.
I think you'd have to go a long way to find any human being that can outface him. But they're all kind of, everyone's got their own. But you could shoot him with a sniper's rifle from 1,000 meters away, and he'd be dead. Just that would be it for Nightingale. Blow him up or something, and none of them are invincible. All of them have their own vulnerabilities, and all of them. I mean, part of it is that Peter is a police officer. He can't just shoot them.
Right.
He's got to arrest them. He's got to try and at least capture them, keep collateral down to a minimum, not blow up too many major buildings, and kind of like, this is part of the story. I'm trying to avoid power creep as well. So you have a tendency in urban fantasy for like the protagonists to get more and more powerful, and then the opponents have to get more and more powerful to deal with it. And I'm trying to avoid too much power creep in the story, so that Peter is getting better as a wizard, but there's not this kind of like step up where he becomes a demigod who bestrides the world.
Right.
So I like to kind of keep it so. But I'd say generally in terms of handiness, the librarians. It wasn't Mrs. Chin. That was the one that was in book 3. I can't remember her name. That's terrible. I'll have to look it up. But they were very powerful. The Angel of Death is very powerful. Vivara is very powerful. They're all very formidable, but they all have their limitations. But in some ways, the more dangerous people are the people who can operate the system.
Right.
Than the kind of people who can knock you down with a spell. It's the people that are embedded in the establishment, who can operate the system against you, who can wriggle out of. Like, for example, in False Value, the Skinner is a much more dangerous than the librarians, because he's got money. He's a billionaire and he has all this money, and he can use it to wiggle out of any legal problems. He can shield himself with lawyers. He can escape. He can use his money to buy influence and power. And so therefore, in some ways, he's much more dangerous than the librarians, who are just basically like Peter. They're people trying to do a job. And so therefore, they're less dangerous.
Yeah, they're working within their own system rather than somebody like Skinner, who's trying to bend the system to his own.
Well, Skinner is a disruptor, which basically means bastard.
That's another way to put it. Yeah.
So they call themselves disruptors, but they're just bastards. Actually, if this wasn't an American show, I'd use a slightly more pungent thing, but I know America's very sensitive to the C word. But if I was talking to Australians or something, we'd be using the C word about them, who have created an ideology, which is basically an ideology for total bastards, to justify their bastardness and why they can be bastards. And those people like that are bastards. And there's nothing you can, there's plenty of things you can do about them, but I'm just saying that's what they are. And, all this disruption stuff is just self-serving guff that they come up with, right? That's my opinion. I mean, it may be because I'm an ancient grognard. Anyway, all right.
Now, to you, what do you think that how do you see the major differences between Peter and Nightingale, and how do you think they're most alike?
Well, they're most alike in that they're both total exemplars of the British stiff upper lip. Peter is the working class version, and Nightingale is the posh version. They're both, apart from that, they're quite very different. Nightingale's a jock. Nightingale liked rugby and spells. That's what he liked to do. He's intelligent, but he's practical. He's not very academic. He's not that curious about things. He likes, I will go out and do this. He's curious in a kind of physical way. I want to climb this mountain. I want to ride there. I want to hunt tigers. I want to fight Germans. It's like, I want to jump out of this airplane. I want to learn how to make a staff. This is Nightingale. I want to play rugby. I want to, that sort of thing. He's that kind of guy. Stay out, play the guy. He's also, fairly seriously damaged by his experience, but he's also old. So he's learned a lot from experience. So he's not like, say, somebody who's actually in their 40s who's done the things he's done. He's actually, 120 years old, and so therefore, spoilers, suddenly realised. And so he's got a perspective. He's got a perspective in that. So he doesn't not learn how to use modern technology because he's behind the times. He just doesn't bother because he knows it's going to change again in 10 years' time, because he's seen it change every decade of his life, right? It's all the technology. We all tend to think of, wow, technology is so changeable now. No, it's been, since 1945, technology has just whoomph. And, so he's just learned not to bother learning anything until it becomes important. So now, rather like me and my son, he just goes, Peter, sort this out. Like I do with my son. The computer's broken. Come fix it.
Right. Well, that is handy to have the younger generation who keeps up with all of those changes at hand, isn't it? Now, do you have kind of a favorite book from the series, one that either that you had the most fun writing, or one that that you are the most finished product?
It's always the last one, and at the moment it's one that you're not going to see for about 2 years. So
oh well.
Because I got very efficient over COVID and wrote 2 novellas, but I don't think the second novella is going to get published until no. And that's the Nightingale novella, which is set in New York in the 1920s.
Oh wow.
And I didn't know very much about. I mean, I knew, you know what like New York, big city, jazz, Harlem Renaissance, all that kind of stuff. When I actually started to do research, it was wow. It was like just a ferment in sort of like the mid-20s, a ferment of intellectual and artistic, and everywhere, like from one end of Manhattan down into the Bronx and everywhere, ferment of things, and a magnet that just attracted talent. And it was just also because of Prohibition. And I didn't realize how gay it was. No one told me about the faggot balls. I suggest everyone goes and looks up faggot balls, right? That just, do you think that sort of thing's like modern? No, 1920s. And because Prohibition had made having a good time illegal for everybody, right, it meant that everybody could have a good time on a kind of equal basis. Although, the police did noticeably harass some people more than others. So because of that, weirdly it was permissive. It was a weirdly permissive era, and an openness to new ideas and everything, a kind of an excitement, and it's just had so much fun. Plus, my main character in that one is basically Bertie Wooster, and I had tremendous amount of fun riffing off PG Woodhouse. You see, so because like. with and that was, so I would have to say that's my favorite, but that's also the last one I finished, so that's fit the pattern of whichever one is the last one I finished is the one I like the most. No doubt I will like the one I'm writing now the best when I finished it, mainly because I'll have finished it and I don't have to write it anymore because, oh god, thank god.
You can take a break. Yeah.
Right.
Now you have a whole volume of short stories, the Tales from the Folly, and you have several novellas that are set within the series. And do you have any favorites out of each of those that were really
of the short stories? My favorite is by far Dedicated Follower of Fashion.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
because it was just like just sprang into my head and look, I have an idea, write me down quick. And of the novellas, my favorite is What Abigail Did That Summer, but only by a hair. I love, and the one I'm just talking about, that's a novella, and I've got a novella coming out this year, and which is a Reynolds novella, which is set in Wisconsin of all places.
Oh wow.
Northeastern Wisconsin, so that was a lot of fun, in the snow, called Winter's Gift. So it's like that was the research for that was great, but there was no way I was going to Wisconsin in the winter.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Apart from everything else, I can't drive, you see. So I went on Google Maps to see if I could get to this small town that I was using as the sort of basis of the fictional small town I was using, and it just went, there are no public transport links to this town. I thought, well, that's me done. Not even a Greyhound bus. So
yeah, so much for that. That is true. There are some unusual routes and roads in some parts of the country because it's so big. So
some places
area wise,
unless you drive, you see, or fly in some cases. So
right, get your own helicopter. Maybe that's what you need to do is get a helicopter.
I did look at of going to MSP and then hiring a float plane.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Out there, that would have been fun, but it just wasn't practical. And also then COVID swept in, and that was it for everyone going anywhere. So
right, it has certainly made a difference in how we do things in the world.
Yes, it does. It does. And also, I'm getting very intolerant of long plane flights now. I'm like, oh, do I have to go more than an hour and a half in a seat?
Right. And it's not as though you can just stop in the middle of the ocean. We haven't figured that out yet.
I would totally come to America more often if I could get a liner.
Oh, okay.
If I could get an old-fashioned liner across it, if you put me on a White Star line from the 1950s, I would totally go across to New York that way, and then get a domestic.
Right.
That would work for me. That would totally work for me. I think if someone's missing a trick, I think someone should restart transatlantic luxury, because it just would be so nice that if you just make it a little part of your holiday, going across the Atlantic. That would be so cool.
Somebody out there, do that. There's many other cruises that are out there that would appeal to somebody. That would,
Well, you think about it, it would be great. You could do a deal with US Customs, so they did your customs when you're on the boat, so you didn't have to do all that queuing up and being shouted at by grim-faced men.
Or women in some cases. You're grim-faced anybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, in Florida, it was really funny. We went to Disney World quite a long time ago, 2005, and in Florida there were posters saying, "Remember, you are the first sign of America," because Florida, of course, lives on its tourism. And
right.
And these signs, these posters were aimed at the customs and border patrol people because they didn't want them scaring off the tourists. They wanted to be welcoming and lovely, and it hadn't worked very well. Although they were friendlier than they are at LaGuardia. So,
Let's hope so. Yeah, I was going to say they're supposed to pride themselves on that at Disney World. But speaking of kind of world travel, the German counterparts
Yes.
to Peter and Gulid or whomever you want to compare the Vanessa to, will we see more of them?
Oh yeah, we would have. I did have a book planned, and that got kiboshed by COVID.
Ah,
I
okay.
was going, and that's dropped off the schedule. But it's like a lot of my ideas. It's sitting there going, "When are you going to write this book? When are you going to write this book?" Like, I got to write this book first. Yeah, but then you're going to write me, right? You're going to write me because I'm the next book. No, I'm contracted to write this book. Oh,
It's
go on, write me. So I have quite a lot. I don't know if it's a full length novel yet, or one of those novels that's made up of short stories. You know, like you string a group of short stories, so linked short stories. But
right.
I've got an idea for a Toby and Vanessa book because they're just getting really annoying now. They're just going, when are we going to have it?
They just won't let you stop.
They won't let me
Well, now,
stop. And I'm always going to Germany, so I'm constantly traveling across Germany, going, "Oh, that's interesting," like that. You know, oh, that's going.
so you're like note to self, something to add in,
I
right?
have notebooks.
Well,
I have notebooks full of just German stuff. Going,
well,
oh, this is
good.
an interesting German thing. I will put this in the notebook. I now have a German notebook that just goes just for Germany because I just keep coming across interesting things like this. If you ever go to Germany, go out the Brocken. Very interesting. It's a mountain in what was used to be the no man's land between East and West Germany. And there's a steam train. You get a steam train. So you get double. You get steam train up the Brocken. So you don't have to climb the mountain on foot, which is great.
Oh
And
boy.
you have a look around. You look at all the, oh, that's not a big view. This is an interesting piece of history. You go to the guest shop, then you get the steam train back down. No. In time for Blackburst.
Oh, there. Yeah, you got to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
One that here we have the most recent book in the
Yay!
series. I understand is about to come out in paper. I guess it's mid March.
Coming in paper, out in paperback. I will tell you. Now, I don't know what the American dates are, actually. That's a good point. I should check.
I think it's mid March here.
But it's the 23rd of February in the UK, so
Oh, okay.
it can't be that much longer after so mid March sounds about right.
Now, one thing that I found interesting was, and I hope these show, is when I was looking at both of these, how much alike they are. This is the first book, and this is the most recent one, and then even the backs are, very similar.
Yeah, well,
So,
the covers have been very successful, and they would, because they're publishers, they want to change them because publishers hate to have a series of books with the covers stay the same for more than about 4 books. But my criteria has been that they can change them when they come up with something better.
there you go.
And so far, they haven't come up with something better, and so therefore they've basically stayed the same. We might try and experimenting with the paperbacks. We talk about experimenting with the paperback covers because just to see if we can come up with something, but we can't think of anything because most crime, you see, the thinking is that can we expand the audience because they're a business, so they want to expand the audience, right? So they think, what can we do to attract kind of non-ready people who are not reading them? So they think, well, can we make them more crime-like? Can we make them more general fiction-y? But the thing is, crime covers are so boring. If you looked at crime covers recently, American crime covers are usually people in alleyways, and the British crime covers are usually architectural features or trees on moors and things like that with stark backgrounds, and they work very well. I think some of them are very good crime covers, but they're not exactly setting the world on fire. You see, whereas that's very distinctive. And we know it's distinctive because lots of people have started copying it as a style.
Right,
So,
right.
You stole that cover idea from me, you bastards. So,
now your graphic novels, there are now 10 of those that have come out. And how did you get that? How did that get going? And how integrated into the series are they? I must admit, I have not read any of those yet, so I've still got stuff to keep me busy.
I wanted to write a graphic novel. And the beauty of having like an IP, like what they call a franchise, is that you can go to people and say, "You can have my franchise as long as you let me write a graphic novel." And they go, "Ooh." And then you get to a certain level of success and they go, "Oh, please write a graphic novel." And I didn't want to write adaptations as graphic novels because I didn't think they would work very well. I don't think you could do a good version of Rivers of London as a graphic novel. So I thought, let's do them as what they call interstitial works. So they're works that fall between the novels, and you can do different stories with graphic novels that you can't do. Graphic novels tend towards the more obviously visually interesting, more action orientated, just because of the format of it. And there are jokes and time jumps and things that you can't do in a book that you can do in a graphic novel. So we started doing. I brought on my friend Andrew Cartmel, who's got a lot of who's already had experience writing graphic novels. B has the kind of attention to detail, because when you write the scripts, when you get the proofs back, you have to go through them and make sure that what's gone on the page is actually what you wrote. With parameters. You need someone who will spot if they've done the panel wrong or if they've got it. And he's got that kind of a brain. So he came on with me and we co-wrote them. And then we found that we had such different writing sort of like patterns that we couldn't write them like, you do this bit, I do that bit, you do this bit, because I take ages and he does them very quickly and he'd get impatient waiting for me to write the next bit. So what we now do is that one of us will take the lead and the other one will play the kind of script editor role.
Oh, okay.
That's what we're doing. And then we decided that we wanted to bring some more people in. We want to diversify the writers a bit. So Andrew had a friend called Celeste Bronfman, who's a very talented writer working in Canada now, or I think America. She was in Canada at the time. And so we said, "Do you want to write one?" She came up, she pitched an idea, Titan liked it, and then we went with that one. That was the last one. That's the one that's coming out now, I think. Then the next one will be written by a friend of mine called James Swallow, because he's always wanted to do a graphic novel, and I've always wanted a really action-packed kind of and he's an action-packed kind of thriller writer kind of person, techno thriller. So this is going to have helicopters and action sequences in it, and he's very, very good at that. And I thought that would be fun. And then I think I'll probably write the one after that myself. So it's a lot of fun. They're just they're supposed to be fun, right? My work is not supposed to cause people pain.
Unless it's your characters.
But my characters cause me pain, obviously.
Yeah, that's true.
My idea was that the graphic novels would be fun, that people could either read them or they don't read them. If they don't like, not everyone likes graphic novels. I totally get that. If you don't like graphic novels, you shouldn't read the graphic novels.
Probably, yeah. That's
and
a good point.
There's no crucial kind of. This is not a Song of Ice and Fire, right? There is no overarching plot that if you miss a bit, you'll go, "Oh God, I missed that bit, and now I can't understand the whole plot." No. Things change over the course of time in my books, but it's not a kind of overarching plot things. And the graphic novels are fun, where I can do things that you can't do in the books because it's a graphic novel, and I can bring in other people who can do things, and the artists can make their own interpretations. And they are, I mean, you can get too I think of them as canon, but I can understand why people don't want to. In which case, don't. That's fine by me. And the short stories are the same, although the short stories are sort of the short stories are also fun. My writing is for fun. People are supposed to have fun. That's the thing.
Well, they look very interesting. So I'm glad that I have those to look forward to as I wait for book 10. And I do have a question for you, that if yet another, if Peter could make a guest appearance in some other urban fantasy series, which one would you choose to have him go make?
I wouldn't have him turn up in. I'd love him to be in Leverage.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he could help. He could certainly do quite a bit in there.
I'd
Yes.
love him to be in Leverage. I'd love to have the Leverage crew trying to deal with real magic going on and going, is that real? Is he a con man? What's going on here? Right. That would be
Yeah.
fun. I think that would be a lot of fun. Also, I'd like Abigail to turn up in a Brokenwood, the Brokenwood Mysteries, which is a New Zealand show.
Oh, okay. I have not heard of that. I'll have to check that out.
I don't think anyone. I wouldn't try and inflict poor Jim Butcher. I wouldn't try and inflict Peter on poor Jim Butcher because
I think Peter and Harry would probably do okay together, though.
I think they do okay, but the power levels are so distinct. I mean, like in Jim Butcher, like wizards generally level skyscrapers on a regular basis, whereas Peter does it by accident generally. If he's
Right.
to be honest.
Well, Harry did kind of start out that way, so
Yeah,
he
well,
maybe
early
take people
Harry.
under his
I think
wing.
you could slip Peter into early Harry with no problems, but
Oh,
I think later Harry, I think when he's champion of the white, and all that kind of stuff. I think that's
right.
like I
Now,
I've got to catch up with those. Actually, that's a good point. I've fallen behind. Good.
uh-oh. Now, was there one of your books that you particularly struggled with, that the writing of it was, just more problematic for some reason, or something like that?
All of them have had bad patches. This just seems to be a pattern when you're writing. You're writing them, you kind of pluck all the low hanging fruit, and then you go, and then what happens? And your brain goes, oh no, I was plucking all the low hanging fruit, and you go, oh god, and then you have to sit down and I've learned how to get over that patch now. So all my books have that patch, but I've now learned. So for the first book I just wrote in a tearing hurry. The second book, slightly less tearing hurry. Then you get published, you see, and then people have expectations. And when people have expectations, you suddenly think, but what if they don't like it? And that's a pain. You have to kind of learn not to listen to your head pretending to be other people not liking your work, if that makes any sense. And just learn to get on with the book and just hope that they like it. In the end, when you're writing, that's all you can do. You write the best book you can and you hope they like it. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
Right. And then whatever you've learned that you how to do the best job you can, I'm sure. So
Yeah, you pick up things. You pick up techniques. Mostly, I find it's a question of getting inside Peter's head and then let him do the talking. If I can do that, then I'm usually all right. And then you have to go back and kind of like fix any contradictions and stuff. But I've learned to write on slightly more on time, which my publishers appreciate.
yeah.
I'm very grateful to people like Patrick Rothfuss and G.R.R. Martin for being so late that I look good in comparison.
There you go. That's right. That's right. Even so, I'm sure you get people asking you what's coming up next. And I was actually going to. I don't know how much you're allowed to talk about it, but I know there has been an exciting option going on for you.
Yeah, no, well, I call it Schrodinger's television series. In that it's been in option by one company or another essentially since it came out, and it's a very difficult TV show to make. It's expensive for a British show. It doesn't have massive American appeal, so it's not like Bridgerton or The Crown or something like that. So financing it it's quite tricky. So finding a way to make it that I will allow them to make it is also a problem they have because I'm quite protective of it. So in between that, it's been through quite a lot of wash cycles. Unfortunately, the one before this one was kiboshed by COVID again.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a very promising kind of team set up, and it just got wrecked by COVID, and that was very unfortunate because I was very enthusiastic about that one. I'm very enthusiastic about this one, but I've been doing this for too long for me to get excited. I'll get excited when I'm on set at the craft table.
Right, and you want it to be a really good one too. Now, for my last question, this is kind of a craft question: do you prefer to have quiet when you're writing, or do you like some kind of background sound of some sort?
I vary. Sometimes I just sometimes you need quiet. Sometimes I like to have mood music. And I'm writing something sad because you remember you're writing a sad scene. You can take like 3 days to write a sad scene, so you got to maintain a level of sadness for 3 days. So I have like a collection of very sad music that I'm playing. And oh, this is so sad. And then also when I'm writing action sequences, I sometimes put on actiony kind of music or stuff like that.
Oh,
Film scores are very good for writing too because they're designed to go sort of almost subconsciously. Film scores, a lot of film scores. So a lot of Danny Elfman and Goldsmith and people like that.
okay.
I find those are very good. And nowadays, of course, you can build up a track. So I have like an action music tracks playlist, and I have a sad music. And I mean, it gets quite specific. Some of them are building tension, building up to an action sequence, but not quite getting there playlist. When you're doing the tension rising bit, and then you switch over to the action playlist when you actually get to the action, and things like that. I've just kind of like spy music, creepy music. While I was writing the one set in New York in 1920s, I had a lot of jazz, a lot of 1920s jazz go, plus the theme song from Jeeves and Wooster.
Oh, wow, wow.
Which
Yeah,
quite,
I can see where that having something that helps set the mood would make a big difference. Yeah.
so you're sitting there, so I now know all the lyrics to Minnie the Moocher. First, there you go. A lot of people know that, and Cab Calloway didn't because he gets on forgetting the words, which is why he does all that noise making in the middle because he's forgotten the words.
Oh, that's funny. I did not realize that. Well, there
No,
you
it's
go.
famous. It's famous. All that scat in the middle is because Cab Calloway has forgotten the words. And then that was the first couple of times, and now he incorporated it and it became expected.
Right, right.
That's another thing I learned by writing a book. There you go.
Yeah, it's something new every day, I'm sure. So, well, Ben, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And it's been great to meet you. We've never met before, and
No,
in
it was
person.
fun.
And we'll hope that we get you there one day. And before we go, I want to let everybody know that yes, I hope that they will enjoy this. But also at the end of February, we will be doing our Buffy Watch season 5. And stay tuned for that for our monthly Buffy discussion. So, but in any case, Ben, thank you so very much for this. We really appreciate it. And I know that everyone who watches this will say that, we certainly hope we will see you.
As soon as they get going, I'm there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And we will say goodbye to our viewers. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mhm.